and do that right now. If you're just joining us, we just got started, but to recap the objectives for tonight, we're going to talk about how to create a strategic plan that works for you for 2025. And obviously, we are almost at the end of 2024. And ideally, this is something that probably should have been done a couple of months ago, but there's no harm, better late than never is kind of my theory. And for those of us who are serious, which is evidenced by us being here tonight, this is definitely something that we can put together and execute in a way that's a demonstration of good stewardship and in a way that gets us the return that we need. So with 10 days left, this is going to be a very accelerated kind of webinar that we do. But again, the hope is that it's practical enough that in the next 10 days, you can implement something and see a return on it. So this is split into two parts, technical sustainability and cultural systems. And I believe they work in tandem, so they go together. The technical stuff, obviously, are the systems that give us the actual return. So if you are somewhat familiar with strategic planning, like the frameworks of strategic planning, you've heard the concept of ROI, return on investment, before. Again, no dumb questions. So if there's jargon, anything that I say that you need me to kind of flesh out, please feel free to interject at any point. But ROI is a common concept in strategic planning, and it essentially says there's a return on investment. So whatever we invest, whatever we put into our business, we should see an equivalent return or a greater return. So for those of us who are bootstrapping, if I put my last $500 into a business, at some point, I should make $500 back or more, right? If I'm putting 40 hours a week and I've quantified my time or monetized my time as worth $10 an hour, I should see $400 a week in return or more. So the technical sustainability pieces are the systems that we put to see those metrics come to life. The cultural systems are the nuanced stuff, but they're the stuff that separates you from everybody else. They're the things that separate you from everybody else in the market. So there can be 1,001 organizations that speak to Christian women, but there should be something or a few things that separate McQuinn. And people should not have to read a book to know what those things are that separate McQuinn. The experience in McQuinn should confirm those things. And so similarly with your business, there are cultural systems that should be put in place that separate you, that also add value. So when we're talking about technical sustainability, a couple of things that we're going to focus on today is how to build capacity. Burnout is a thing, and in 13 years, I can't say I have completely overcome how to not experience burnout, but I have developed systems so that there's less burnout than there was now, than there was, 3 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. Securing funding, obviously that's the biggest thing and the biggest headache for many of us is where's this money going to come from for this vision? As faith-based entrepreneurs, we always have the hope, right, of God performing a miracle for our needs. And sometimes that does, and please don't think I'm sounding faithless, but sometimes that doesn't always translate, right? When the bills are piled up and you're like, God, I just need a miracle, and day 7 come by and there's no miracle per se that you're seeing in front of you, you start to question, right? Is God really in this thing? And I've learned that he really is in it sometimes. He really is in it, but sometimes it's not about the miracle. It's about you kind of being diligent and working what he's given you, the resources that he's given you. Business development, and then identifying your ideal audience, so marketing. Cultural systems, the adding value piece, developing brand ambassadors. So those are people who are so happy with you that they do the work of marketing for you without you even having to ask them or incentivize them. And staying true to yourself. There's so much in the market that's constantly trying to make you be something that doesn't always feel authentic. So how do you hold on to that? We're going to talk about some of those things today. At the end of this, there's a one-page strategic plan, and this is the template. Um, yeah, this is a sample, and we have a template that we have in a shared drive that we're going to share with you. And the hope is that you can fill this out for yourself going into 2025, so that all of the elements here, which is essentially what we're doing tonight, is going over these elements. You have them as a blueprint for your business or your idea for 2025. And with that, we're going to go ahead and if we could please drop that link in the chat. When you get that link, please feel free to open it if you're on the computer. If you're on your phone, you can just copy it and just paste it for later. But it's a shared drive that has some supplemental materials for you that we're going to go through tonight. So again, the goal is to be very hands-on. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to identify what your goals are for 2025. And if you haven't thought about them yet, no pressure, don't feel bad. Now is the perfect time for you to start thinking about them. Um, Before you do the goal planning activity, though, that we have, I'm gonna go visit some foundational pieces of goal planning. So some of us are probably familiar with the SMART goals concept, and the SMART goals concept says that a goal is not a good goal unless it meets all of these elements at the same time. So it has to be specific, it has to be measurable, it has to be attainable, it has to be realistic, and it has to be timely. So for those of us who have money on our minds, and nothing wrong with that, it's not enough to say my business needs to make more money next year. It needs to make $100,000 next year. That's an exact figure that's informed by the fact that I made 80 this year and I fell short because I stretched my budget way beyond, what I could afford. So there's the specificity. It has to be $100. There's some metric to that, so it's measurable. Is it attainable? That's something that is informed by whether or not you can do it. So some questions that you'll ask yourself: do I have the marketing budget to go and reach the number of people that I need to reach to make sure that I get $100,000 in return? Is it realistic? Is this something that I actually can do, or do I need to downsize and eliminate some of my expenses so that $80,000 can work for my business without all of my expenses being a burden for me? So attainable, realistic, and then timely. If we're talking about a 1-year plan for 2025, obviously there is some sense of urgency. And the trick with timely is that you have these two extremes. So it can't be too far in advance, because then we get lazy and life happens and we get distracted and then things just happen. But it can't be so rushed that we don't have a good foundation in place. So who, what, where, when, and how usually answers this. Answering who, what, where, when, and how usually will satisfy this standard of SMART. $100,000. We know all the arms that are going to make $100,000 work. So, for example, if I have a coaching business, I might not make $100,000 from coaching, but I might make $60,000 from coaching, maybe $15,000 from the books that I might develop, $10,000 from the merch that I might sell, all from my coaching information, another $10,000 from the events that I might put on, the ticketed events, and maybe another $5,000 or so, whatever the difference is, from being contracted, not to coach, but to be an expert on what I typically coach and consult with. And again, all of those things make up the $100,000. One last thing before we get into the activities and kind of the DIY stuff for tonight is rethinking how we think about goals. So for many of us, especially those of us who are not traditionally trained in business, so you didn't go the MBA route, you really just had a vision and a burden from the Lord, and you decided, I'm going to step out on faith and just do this thing. There's a shift that needs to happen for us where it's not just like a lifestyle shift, it's almost like a mental shift, right? So we have to redo some frameworks. And this is one of the ones that I found really was critical for me in figuring out whether or not I was going to do this full time, and whether or not this was going to go anywhere as an entrepreneur. So typically, goal setting looks like, I'm going to make $100,000. we put the fishing hook, the fishing line out, and then we just work. And then halfway through the year, we're like, dang it, this is not working, but I'm in too deep, so I can't give up. And people are looking at me, and my name and my reputation is on the line. But it's this linear approach, and we just keep working. And my challenge tonight, as we go through this presentation, is to do away with that linear approach to the business that God has called us to, and to really embrace this circular approach, or a cyclical approach might be a better way to define it. And it looks like doing this assessment. If you're here now, you're in this assessment phase where you're saying, this is what happened in 2024. If you've already started, this is what worked, this is what didn't work, this is how I'm adjusting my goal. So before I even set a goal for 2025, it's not going to be kind of this blanket shot in the dark, but it's going to be based on actual experience, lived experience, and I'm making an assessment of whether this thing is still viable. Based on that assessment, then you set the goal. As you're setting the goal, you have defined terms in there where you're actually assessing. So if at the top of the year, we wanted to reach 1,000 people, and by June, we've only reached 200 people, there's nothing wrong with saying 2025 is going to look a little bit different. So let me adjust my financial goals, my capacity goals, my customer goals, et cetera, et cetera. But we do an assessment and then we reset that goal. And it's an active process, which is why I'm saying it's cyclical, because you might accomplish one goal, adjust, attempt that goal again, or move on to another goal, but it never really ends. You just keep going. So again, the challenge for tonight as we're going through this is to really say the linear approach hasn't worked for many of us. We've put a lot of money into ideas that haven't always yielded the return that we expected. But a circular approach might be a little bit more practical. And that's not a diss to our faith, but it's good stewardship, right? It's good stewardship to say, I'm going to take this approach where I'm actively evaluating what works and what doesn't work.
I have a quick
Okay, so
question before.
any questions about that framework?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So, what do you recommend as far as like how often you should be doing those assessments to kind of avoid like being obsessive, right? Like how often should you be doing that?
Yeah, so I'm one that doesn't think there's such a thing as obsessive. That's why I'm laughing, because I'll probably be called obsessive, but I think quarterly is healthy. I think if you do them even monthly, so quarterly, I recommend doing them if you are working with people so that you can get feedback from people. Any more than that, then it does start to feel obsessive. If you're working on a team, quarterly, externally, monthly, internally, I think is healthy. If you're a solopreneur, I don't think monthly is obsessive. I think monthly is it's kind of a good time frame. Any other questions? Okay, awesome. So thank you for that, Nishia. So there's a link that we just put in the chat. I think we just put it in the chat, and it's gonna take you to a shared drive that we have. Yep, thank you, Zoe, for putting that there. And when you click on that shared drive, you're gonna see a few different documents. And the document that we'd like for you to click on right now is the goal plan. So it looks like this. Did my screen switch to the goal plan? Okay, awesome. Okay, so yep, so and these are yours to keep, so feel free to download them later on to work on them. But there are 4 pillars to business, and I'll talk about those shortly, but finances, operations, capacity, customer. And you're gonna go at your own pace, right? So even though I'm doing an overview of all of these, please feel free to kind of break these down and go at a pace that feels comfortable for you. So 4 goal planning sheets here, and they all work the same, but we split them up into these 4 pages. And these are private, so don't write on this sheet on the shared drive, because then we can see them. But feel free to copy it so that you have your own document that you're working on, or to just download them so that they're saved on your computer. But I'll do one as an example. So thinking about 2025, let's start with financial goal. Long term in this case is 1 year. So let's say your goal is $100,000. That's all I want you to write. Don't worry about the details just yet. After you fill that out, $100,000 by the end of 2025, your short-term goal, obviously in the next 6 months, is going to be $50,000. And that's assuming you're working with a nice even round number like this. In the next 90 days, this is where it gets tricky, and this is where our wheels have to start turning. It's not enough to say in the next 90 days, I want to make $25,000, but we have to start identifying what that looks like. Okay, so the who, what, where, when, and how. $25,000. If you haven't launched your program, that's something that you want to write in the next 90 days is I want to launch this program that has a price, it's a high ticket price item that's $1,000. So in the next 90 days, I want to launch this program and I want to target 25 or 250 people to purchase this item at $1,000. Forgive me if my math is off, but doing that calculation in your head. So we're going to launch the program at this price, targeting X amount of people. So this is just an example, and this can apply to anything. If you're writing a book, whatever you're doing, but in the next 90 days, how do we actually get to $50,000? So two things that we're doing was we're identifying a financial benchmark, and then we're starting to think through, not completely because we don't have enough time, what does moving toward that goal look like? And this is just for the purposes of the sheet. And then is this something that I'm going to be able to do by myself? We're just brainstorming at this point, or do I need the help of somebody else? So if I'm thinking about launching a program that's going to be a high ticket item, like $1,000 per person, then perhaps I'm working in partnership with somebody else who's going to offer added value to justify that price point. So just a brain dump. And we're giving just about 3 minutes for this. Um, and if you finish finances and you start thinking through operations and your customer and your capacity goals for 2025, feel free to start writing those as well. But let's just start with financial goals or any of them, actually. If you're not comfortable yet with what those numbers look like for you, just start with any of them um, and just start a brain dump. So just in about 3 minutes. Any questions about this sheet? No, it's pretty self-explanatory. Is it self-explanatory or it is? Okay. Okay. So I'll give about 3 minutes just for you all to do a brain dump. Remember, you can just copy this to have your own private sheet or download it. All right, one more minute. Okay. Um, do people need more time? Okay, I'm not hearing anything. Okay. How was that for everyone to I'd love to hear from someone who hasn't really thought about it. And this is kind of the first time that you're really kind of thinking that through, and someone who's been thinking about it for a while and maybe documenting it or has been documenting it. How is this activity? Yes, Michelle.
So I've not done this before. And so it was a little intimidating, even though it was like pretty clear cut. Uh, one of those people who likes to have the right answers, and I didn't know what to necessarily put in every block. Yeah, the money amount, that part is easy. And I can think of, well, how many coaching clients would I need in order to reach that in a year's time or in 3 months' time? But everything else just seemed a little like, I don't know what to put here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
And Michelle, it's interesting because sometimes it's not black and white and clear cut. So you
Mhm.
might have a total goal of, let's say, 100,000. I'm going to stick with that number. And you
Mhm.
start out with $100 times 1,000 clients, and then realize you fell short on either end. So perhaps $100 is not quite enough. And then midway through the year, you decide you're going to double up and charge $200 an hour, which is obviously going to change the target benchmark for marketing. And
Mhm.
so you start out with one thing and then halfway through have to change it anyway because of the way the market is going. So yeah, it can get tricky. It's very nuanced.
But it helps to hear that though.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And for a long time, I felt like a failure with having to adjust some of those things because typically industry best practice is like you wait until this set term to do price adjustments. And if you offered it initially, then integrity says I have to maintain that price point for the rest of the year. But that's just not the reality sometimes of what the back end looks like. So
Got it.
yeah.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
sharing, Michelle. You're welcome. Anyone else?
Yeah, I wanted to jump in for a second. This is Edith. Um, I I guess I've seen this. I've done these exercises. I've even walked through the exercises with people, and I go back to, are we being women of faith, believers in Christ? Shouldn't the goal first be whatever the Father is outlining and walking us through? Because who and I get it, because this is actually where we start looking like the world as far as how we're
Mm,
designing these things. And the
mm,
reality is I know some very successful unquote business people, and they didn't do one bit of marketing. They don't have one website, and they get customers. I mean, in fact,
mm,
one I know was a Vietnam veteran who got his doctorate in something dealing with
mm,
mechanical whatever. The only thing he did is he put his wife's name. He established a federal contracting, woman owned, under his wife's name. His
mm.
phone used to ring off the hook, and his customers were the White House, the DOD. He was the Naval Observatory. Sorry, the Vice President's house, because he would walk in and he'd do HVAC. He has a top secret clearance.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying is that I get it, and actually I've had debates with believers who are ministers
Hmm.
who are in business, and they would quickly say business is business, ministry is ministry. I said no, because I look at the examples of Joseph. He brought
Hmm.
God in his decision making, the allocation of resources, how he did things, you
Yeah.
know. So I just wanted to. I didn't do the exercise because, to be honest with you, where I am now, I didn't think I would get where I am, and I'm
Yeah.
shocked. It's almost
Yeah.
like the Father is like, I sowed some seeds last year. It was painful, lost a lot of money, and he's
Hmm.
restoring it this year. But I wasn't
Hmm.
looking for it. It fell into my lap.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm saying, So I need to, like, first, like, focus on what God is saying, and
Yeah.
then, take it from there. But anyway, that's my 2 cents. That's all.
That's an incredible 2 cents. That's more than 2 cents, Edith, to be honest with you. Because I've had experiences, same. I've shared many times unashamedly that when I lost everything in business, the breakthrough came not because of anything that I did in that moment, but because God supernaturally opened the door. But Edith, what I did find, so I remember, and I'm not saying this to be braggadocious, but I remember getting a six-figure contract, Edith, from a client that was as a result of something that I had no business doing, but they did not offer me that contract until years of being faithful in a much smaller contract with them. I say that to say, sometimes when God supernaturally opens the door, it's not a matter of like, will he continue to open the door? It's a matter of like, have you proven yourself to be a good steward to like the technical development, right? The systems development for more. And the first thing that comes to my mind, and I don't think faith and logic or faith and active business acumen have to be opposite of each other. I think they actually work together. Um, the first thing that I thought of as you were talking was just the parable of the talents, right? And I think what the master says to to the faithful servant is something that we should not overlook. And even the Proverbs 31 woman, where there's fidelity to it. Um, for me, the balance comes in not completely relying on these things, but submitting these things, like these systems and stuff, to God and saying, God, as I'm obedient to you and identifying these benchmarks based on what you've revealed to me, give me the capacity to continue to manage what you give me. I just don't think, and I don't know if anybody else has anything to add to this, but I just don't think it has to be in extremes where it's all a matter of faith and not stewardship, or it's all a matter of like work, and not faith. I think there's a balance here that the Lord expects from us. And stewardship, I think, is what the Bible calls it. But just one more person and then we'll move forward so that we don't
Uh,
get
I
distracted.
really
Go
want
ahead,
to
Nicole.
jump in here and
Sure.
just remind us. I hear everything that Edith said, but God also told us to make our requests known. And so it's
Yeah.
not that we come in greed, but He knows the desires of our hearts. And so He says to make our requests known. And with that, He says, write the plan and make it plain. So if He's given you an idea, it is our job, as Adrena said, to be good stewards of it and begin to plan that out. Now, do we know exactly what it looks like? No, we don't, but we know that we can write our plans out. We can commit them to God and allow God to do with them what He chooses to do. And so it's not that we're just sitting and saying, God, do something. And it's not just that we're sitting and saying, we don't need God. We know that the idea that He gives us and the seeds that He plants in us are for Him to bring to fruition once we give them back to Him. So He's planting things in us. He's given us ideas, and He's expecting us to work diligently on those ideas that He has given us so that we can give it back to Him and allow Him to be God with it. And with that, I think of how Moses had all of these accolades and he had all of these things, and he went to God and said, I can't, but God said, you can, because He embedded all these things with him, and He expected, God allowed him to see that he can draw out those things that He taught him when he was in the Pharaoh's house, when he thought he couldn't speak, when he couldn't do all these things. But God educated him in the house of the king. God gave him all these things and said, give it back to me and watch me. So I feel like
Amen.
even as God gives us things in situations and businesses, we do with it what we humanly know to do, knowing that as Christians, we rely on God to bring the increase. We rely on God to meet us. We give what He gives us back to Him and trust Him with it. That's all
Amen.
I got.
Come on, Pastor Nicole. I'm here for it. Thank you though. But Edith, I think that's a great point, because it's easy for this stuff to become idolatry, where we rely so much on ourselves and our abilities that we forget that it's God first. Um, and thank you, Nicole, for saying that. Um, okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get into some of these systems. Hopefully, there's a balance here that we can strike. There's a poll that just launched, and the question is, how ready is your business for success in 2025? Okay, so we have 60% of folks still working on the plan. Wait, why is that on there twice? Both of them are on there twice. Okay, so pretty much 100% said everybody is saying still working on the plan. Okay, we have one person, okay, fully prepared and confident. Okay. Okay, so much everyone here, almost everyone here is still working on the plan. And again, this is a good place for us to be as we're doing that. Taking it back to foundational stuff, right? When we start a business, whether you're doing strategic planning for the first time or you've done it in a while, it's common in business for people to tell you that you need a business plan, you need a business plan. And I'm a full advocate of having a business plan, but I've found that this strategic plan to be much more efficient. But for those who are planners, there are three types of plans that I think you probably want to consider at this time as you're thinking about 2025. Yes, there is your business plan that you want to consult and make sure that you're on track for whatever it is that you proposed when you initially started your business. If you didn't create one, you probably have a business plan or some concepts in your mind. To go a little bit deeper, though, the strategic plan is what brings all of that stuff to life. So it's the strategy for how to implement all the things that you outlined when you wanted to get the loan or you wanted to get the investor and the business partners. But then what we really want to focus on tonight are the action plans. And so these take our strategic plan and it breaks down all of these elements into action bite-sized pieces. There are 4 ways that we create action plans, and again, 2025 and beyond. And the idea here is to break up your business into these 4 areas. So if you think of your business as a house, 4 walls to your house. And what you want to do is you want to prioritize based on your current needs, which wall is most important. And you want to build a strategy for how to make sure that that wall stays up, because 9 times out of 10, the other areas of your business are going to be depending on that wall staying up. All of these walls are equally important, but depending on which you focused on intentionally or unintentionally, you're going to find that some need a little bit more nurturing and a little bit more attention than others. But the 4 areas are operations, and this is how does this all work? Nicole earlier mentioned a blueprint to McClain. So similarly for your business, if I stepped away for whatever reason, how does anyone know how to keep this vision going? And I think for us as Christian entrepreneurs, what we build is so much bigger than us. And so we want somebody to keep it going. So the operations is how does this work? Right? Is that documented, or is it still just an idea in my mind? Am I really just kind of free flowing and improvising as I go along? The customer wall is, who do I serve? And this is beyond just the look of the people that you serve, but the value added that this group needs. And we're going to break these things down as time allows. Finances obviously is what you make and how you spend. And the healthy standard is revenue minus expenses equals profit, right? And we all want to be at profit. That's the biggest sign of health in a business is profitability. But sometimes we don't have the luxury, especially if you're early on. All the stats say that you probably are going to be operating at a deficit for the first couple of years. So you might not be focused on profitability just yet, but you can at least focus on increasing revenue and or lowering expenses. So that's what the finance wall is all about. How do we pay attention to that? And then the capacity wall is what is within that makes this work. If you are a solopreneur, burnout seems almost inevitable. We can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. The reality, though, is that we are human and sometimes it's exhausting, especially if you have other roles in your life, wife, mother, student, sister, daughter, caretaker, all these other things. So how do I build capacity either for myself, which might mean learning more things, getting more certifications, making myself more marketable, or how do I outsource things to people who are trusted so that it's not solely dependent on me? The growth of this business is not solely dependent on me. So those are the four walls. And as I'm talking, hopefully you're thinking about which wall in your entity needs the most attention right now. So we'll start with operations. As you're thinking about 2025, you really want to call into question your mission, your vision, and your purpose. You want to revisit those things. Does your mission, is it still working? Or has some experience in the field changed your mission slightly? And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. I remember getting an email where someone said, I don't think the minority is necessary in your organization. And, I really had to consider that. What would McQuinn look like if we took out minority and we just opened it up? The heart behind why this organization will still be there, but that mission definitely changes, right? And for you, you might find that based on how the market has responded to me, I need to tweak this mission a little bit. And there are set times that you do that, right? Just based on customer behavior. June is not ideal, right? April is not ideal. You can't do it right in the middle of things. It interrupts continuity. So thinking about like the start of a new year, do I change my mission? Do I change my vision, which is the long-term thing? And do I change my purpose? The mission is, why do we exist, right? And there's an immediate action that's associated with that. The vision is long-term, where are we going? What's the impact of this organization look like? And the purpose is, why do I exist, but in a timeless way, right? So long after I'm gone, long after this organization exists as is, like, what will people be saying about this? That's the purpose. When you're talking about your operations for next year, you want to start considering, do I have systems in place? If you don't have systems in place, now is the time to start looking at those systems. So if you have a business plan, it outlines for you how to get from point A to point B. And it analyzes your entity and it breaks it down. So all your streams of revenue, if you have 5 services that you're offering, all of those 5, each of those 5 needs to be looked at very, very closely to figure out, are there certain platforms? Is there software that makes it easier for me to do this? I'll use coaching because there are quite a few coaches in our network. If you're a coach, automation should be your best friend, right? Because there's only one of you. And if your formula says I need to serve 250 people at $100 an hour, the likelihood of you doing that and maintaining everything else that life has as a solopreneur is very, very difficult. And so creating systems around serving 250 people might look like, how do I duplicate myself without the cost associated with hiring more people? So perhaps that's recording the seminars that I have. Perhaps that looks like creating a curriculum that other people can buy and they can teach themselves how to implement this, or they can follow a video. But there are systems associated with, how do I get to this end goal? Another thing in operations is considering what your marketing and your business planning looks like. For those who are new to this, as you're thinking about your operations, this is a good place to start for next year. It's a SWOT analysis, and it asks you to consider how well you're positioned for building systems. It's asking you your strengths as a business right now. What's working for you? If you fell short of your 2024 goal, right, there are a million things that we can be hard on ourselves about, but there are some things that worked really well. And your job in creating operational systems that work is to keep what's working and actually improve and enhance those things that are working. So, but rarely do we actually take the time to do inventory of that. So I'll use McQuinn as an example, right? When we have a model where when we do our meetups, we hope that people become members. There are certain things that happen for that are needed for that to happen. There's an event, we curate an event experience, and we found that there are 1 or 2 things when we analyze that have to be done at a meetup for people to become members of McQuinn. So similarly for you, we can do 17, but it doesn't necessarily mean that every time we do a meetup, everybody's going to become a member if these elements are missing. So when you think about what you did in 2024, what were those key things that you did that led to conversion? Those are your strengths. If it was actually you meeting and talking with people, you want to duplicate that. You don't want to put all your money in social media just because everybody says put your money in social media, because in reality, the conversations actually led to more increase for you than what everybody else is doing. So what was the strength? Opposite of that, obviously, is the weakness. What did not work? What turned out to be a time and or money waster for you in 2024? We want to address those in your systems. If you found that in terms of operations, I spent way too much time in creating content for the business and not actually doing service provision, that's something that needs to be addressed before the calendar flips. The opportunities, what's out there, and this is part of what's called an external environment assessment. So what's out there that you can leverage to um really to reach your goals. So if you are working on a women's organization and you're brand new in this space, perhaps an opportunity that exists for your strategic partnerships with organizations that have a larger following. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's not it's not an indictment on who you are and your capabilities. It's just that there are opportunities out there to leverage what other people are doing to build a similar vision that you might have as well. So opportunities are tapping into things that you didn't necessarily create, you don't have control over, but when done right, you can leverage them to take your business to the next level. And the opposite of that obviously is threats. Those things that you did not control that are out there that are floating that can completely destroy you. So compliance issues, tax issues, competitors that won't let go, like they keep following you and doing everything, mimicking everything that you're doing. Those things are threats. So you want to make sure that you're taking inventory now going into 2025 so that there is some strategy in place to address all of these things. We build a brand and we leverage strengths. We build a strategy and action plan to address weaknesses. We leverage opportunities, and to the best of our abilities, we eliminate threats. So you're going to find in that shared drive that there is a template that's there that you can also start to do a brain dump to think about what your SWOT analysis looks like. Any questions about this or comments, thoughts? Okay, the next wall is your customer wall. And the customer wall is all about who do you serve. One of the things that I hear a lot in the consulting work that I do, I ask business owners, so who do you serve? And they say everyone. And it's such a like utopic answer. I just want to serve everybody. God called me to love everybody. But it doesn't always translate well in real life. And you actually do yourself a disservice when it comes to your marketing, trying to attract and advertise to everyone, like literally. So if anybody's ever done a Google ad or a Facebook ad, you find that $100 goes a lot further when you have a niche market than it does to a broader audience. So the same thing in just kind of your daily experiences with customers. And the key here to figuring out who do I serve in 2025 is to assess who had the immediate buy-in. Who had the immediate buy-in? These are your target audience members. Those people, you want to make sure that you allocate the resource to continue to talk to them. Customer service, you want to make sure that in 2025 that becomes a priority, especially for those who have the buy-in to what you're serving. And then automation. So as your customer base continues to grow, obviously that means that the less attention you can pay to people. But our job is to the best of our ability, help them not feel that. Right. So you want them to feel as close to you as they did when you first started, even though the organization or the business is growing. But your customer, who, what, where, when, and how. If you're new or you're considering this year, who actually are my customers, since I can't serve everybody, an ICP is a great place to start. And we should have a template in there already. If not, it'll be there by the end of the night. But your ICP is asking the question, for my ideal audience, what do they look like? What's their age group? Because that's going to inform how I talk to people. We can't talk to a 15-year-old girl the same way that I would talk to a 50-year-old woman, right? It might be insulting to her. So figuring out the tone of my communication is important, and again, is informed by this ICP. Gender, right? And I know that there's so much politics around gender, right, in our culture right now. But as Christian business owners, we have some absolutes that we're working with. Again, that's informed by something. When you go on a McQuinn page, for example, you see a lot of pinks. It's not by coincidence, right? But you see a lot of pinks, and as the brand continued to grow, we realized, okay, a little bit less pink because we're not talking to 18-year-olds all the time, right? And so that gender piece is important. Their hobbies. The hobbies says that we can have conversational currency beyond your business. So if a woman comes to us and she says, oh my gosh, I just need some encouragement about my Christian walk, that's important, right? Because that's the buy-in into this community. It's not necessarily business. Or it might be someone that's not even a Christian, that's not even, a person of color, but this business piece. So figuring out what do people actually enjoy and leveraging that. Making sure that everything from your stock photos to the tone of your language to the way that you show up and present yourself is intentional based on what this audience has. Now, let me pause here before I go through the rest. I mentioned segmentation. So you have your ideal customer. That's who gets your most attention because obviously they're going to spend the most money with you. But the rules of segmentation says that there are other people who have some interest in this business and we can't forget them completely. So I may have Nicole, who is a woman of color, business owner. She fits all of the criteria that McQuinn is interested in. But I may have Edith, who is a Christian woman, but not necessarily a woman of color. We can't forget about Edith, right? Because Edith is still a potential customer, even though she may not have the type of buy-in that Nicole might have. Then there might be Michelle, who is a man who is a business owner. We don't know if he's a believer or not, and that doesn't matter. But Michelle, maybe Michael, is also a potential customer in that they could serve as a volunteer at our events. They can serve as a donor for anything that we're doing. They can serve as a referral partner because the women in Michael's life, right, might have an interest in what McQuinn does. So we don't completely forget about Michael. But again, the rules of segmentation says that I have the profile data on all of these people and I pay attention to them in proportion to what the expected return is. So as an example, I'm building my social media calendar. There's 7 days in a week. I post 7 days a week. Nicole, because she's the ideal customer, is going to get 3 posts that resonate with her. So Nicole is a 30-year-old woman, again, fits all of this criteria. She's going to see photos that are reminiscent of her, like they look like her, they speak to her, they speak her language. Again, Edith doesn't necessarily fit all those criteria, but we have 1 day a week where we're speaking to the Ediths in the segmentation. And then we have the Michaels where we're saying, hey, Michael, here's your call to action. This is how you get involved. You can become a speaker. You can refer someone. Hey, we have a donation campaign that's going. So in 2025, we're looking beyond our target audience, but we're also improving how we talk to our ideal audience. So again, kind of basic profile data. Who are they? How old are they? Their gender, their hobbies. That's going to determine the behaviors, which will inform things like, when do I actually run a sale? When do these people have disposable income? When are they most interested? McQuinn is for women. Women go on vacation. They are often planning the vacation. They often, if they have young kids, summertime is not good for McQuinn. And I will tell you that by experience and in theory. But that's helpful to know, right? So when we make up our business plan for the year, we have to make sure that there are things to compensate for what we lose in the summertime because the behavior of our target audience says we're not going to get 100% of their attention based on customer behavior during these times of the year. But that's something you have to intentionally know and design around and not just, like coincidentally leave, to happenstance. And then occupation, obviously, that's going to determine things like your price point. I have seen it where a coach is like, but my coaching program is exceptional. And the coaching program really is exceptional, except that they're speaking to the wrong people. So they're charging $1,000 an hour to people who can afford $200 an hour. It's not a mismatch. And again, it's not an indictment on your capabilities as a coach. It's the fact that the ICP will say, based on the occupations of the people that are working with you, these are recent college graduates. They don't have the disposable income that you think that they have. So adjusting what you're offering based on this customer information is really important. Level of education, again, sometimes that might be attached to income, sometimes that might be attached to customer behavior, but it does inform something in an ethnic origin. Sensitivity is huge in this market. Even if you're not developing a business that has like a DEI component or like an overt DEI component, cultural sensitivity is huge. Cancel culture is a real thing. And I know that as Christians, we fear no thing. But again, being good stewards and kind of understanding and discerning the times as the Bible talks about, considering things like that is again important. Things to consider. The spending patterns, the influence of positioning. So how do you make brand ambassadors of customers who are happy with you? Those are the kinds of things that will inform that. So if you have not already, in that shared drive, there should be a prototype that you can work through. And my recommendation to you is to start with at least 4 segments. And all 4 segments are not going to have the buy-in to your first product or your primary product. You might find that the Nicoles are ideal for a coaching program, but the Ediths are ideal for the books that you've created or the webinars that you've developed. And the Michaels are the ones that are developed that are ideal for the webinars that you do online. All 3 of those things are just branches of this one business that you have, and they're all getting some component of what you have to offer, but based on where they are with some of these things, what they can afford, what their behavior tells you about them, they're more likely to buy something other than your ideal or your primary product. And so you adjust based on those things, but again, kind of learning them going into next year is really important. Any questions about this? Okay, should I take the questions as I'm doing a really, really good job, or as I'm talking too fast, or I don't know how to take the silence?
Oh, it's
So
great.
I have a question. How about firing clients?
Ooh, was that you, Edith?
Yep, that's me.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I've had to do it, and I think it is within your right to do it. Now, how you do it says a lot about you. I think in the culture of your business, right? So obviously we try to be peacemakers in everything that we do, and that resolve should be evident to folks. Um, so as a personal conviction, that's where I stand with that. Sometimes it's necessary. All money is not good money, and I'm a firm believer in that. I've had to walk away from stuff where I'm like, this is gonna stress me out. Um, and I'll figure out some other way to get the money. So I'm okay with that. Now, if you happen to fire a bunch of clients, that might mean that there's some rebranding that you might need to do, because it's likely that you're speaking to the wrong clientele if you're finding that you have to fire a bunch of the same types of people. But every now and then come across folks, and yeah, I've had to do it.
I have found that, and I mean no harm when I say what I'm about to say, but I have worked, I used to sell environmentally friendly building materials. And what I have found, and it appealed to the early adopters, innovators, but I found that my client base was River Road, Alexandria, high rank people in the military, upper income people, primarily Caucasian, and those who are African American were no older than maybe 45, city dwellers.
Mm-hmm.
My worst clients, and this has been across the board, has been middle age African American 50 plus African American women from PG County. Those were my worst. Yes, I'm being that specific. Even in doing consulting as a technical writer, those are my worst clients. So I vibe with men under 40 and under, and I vibe with women from like late 20s to like 45. That's who I vibe with.
Mm-hmm. So, hmm. So in undergrad, I studied sociology, right? And I think this is a safe space for me to be honest about some things. I remember having lessons about something called an unconscious bias, which is where we have a couple of experiences and they start informing future or current experiences based on things that happen. So I'm saying this is a safe space, but don't judge me, y'all, and don't let it leave this room, please. But one of the reasons I told God that I did not want to do McQuinn is because I did not want to work with Black women. I did not.
You're
I was
safe with me. You're
I'm
safe with
safe with
me.
you. I appreciate that. I was bullied by Black women growing up, older and age mates. I never felt that I quite fit in enough with Black women at very like critical moments in my life, right? And I went to an HBCU, so that's the irony of that. One of the reasons I struggled with God for a few years before actually being obedient about my point was like, I work with this group of people. I work with white men who just ask you how much is the invoice and they pay. They don't try to negotiate the price. They don't ask for, discounts and ways. This was the honest conversation I was having with God. And then I remembered as he was rebuking me and humbling me and saying, "Oh, did you forget that you're a Black woman too?" He was saying, to me, you have an unconscious bias, and it might not be this deep, Edith, for what you're talking about. For me, where he was saying there's trauma associated with some of these decisions that you're making, and it's affecting your professional life. I say all of that to say, I hear you, and I don't know all of the back end to what's attached to that, but I do know that because of the previous experiences that I had with a certain group of people, I went into many situations looking for that, and that's exactly what I found. I think it is within your right as a business owner, any of us, to say that I want to focus on this group of people and not this group of people to an extent, right? If it doesn't get discriminatory or it doesn't ruin our witness in any way. But I do think there's a psychology to the fact that we're human beings doing business that we have to be able to separate sometimes. That's all I got. I don't know if anyone else had any thoughts about that.
Just wanted to say this.
I agree with what
Please.
what both of you are saying, but I think it's also this is a great call, because what at the foundation of everything is that we're Christian women, and I think that
Mhm.
professional women we are often confronted with the dilemma of I need to pay my own bills, but clients who are referred to you, um, or that, that you attract or whatever, don't necessarily meet your business model. And so I was just thinking, like, has anyone had any um, situations like that where you either adjusted your rate or you just basically said, let me find you somebody else because I can't do it for that. But I think we're confronted with that because of who we are, because we want to help.
I can respond. So, as a previous wedding planner,
Mm.
starting out, and this is not to be again, this is a disclaimer. I'm not trying to be offensive to anyone in the room. This is what starting out as a wedding planner. It's a lot of things that we needed to do. Pro bono. I don't think it's any one of us in the planning. I know in my circle where we just started out and we started doing 100 or $1 million, 6-figure or 7-figure weddings. So initially starting out, my clients were the people that had weddings in recreation centers. My clients were, I adjusted my rate a lot because what I set out for my rate to be versus what my client was and the people whose attention I was drawing, they could not afford my services. So I did adjust it until I learned in the business and became further more experienced. Then my price became my price. And when my price became my price and I did not negotiate on my price, it attracted a different demographic. And then I had the opportunity to do a 6-figure wedding. And then the January before last, having to being able to do a 7-figure wedding. But when the price became my price, my clientele change. And I think when you're in a space and when you're changing your price, it comes with insecurities. Like you're not secure that your services is worth this particular. And now I'm on the verge of opening another business in July, a holiday interior decorating, but my price is my price. And I had people tell me this year, $1,000 for a Christmas tree is ridiculous. Okay, God bless you. This is my price. Have a nice day. And it's not being mean, but I'm not going to negotiate my product and what I do, because then I'll always find myself starting out in business in the area of negotiating with all of my clients. So now starting out, I have a high end photo shoot, I have high end products, because I want to attract a different client, but not being in that space where I'm constantly negotiating my price up and down because of what my customer or my client looks like. It's just straight across the board. This is my worth, this is what I'm doing, and this is what you have to pay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I always want to say Lindsay, but it's Lindsay. I think you bring up a great point, which is that you can start one way and actually evolve to another. And that might mean that not only does your price point change, but your target audience changes as well. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Now, I think sometimes where we drop the ball when something like that happens is we don't do the rebranding that
Right.
tells everybody else this is how we've evolved, right? We just leave everybody else behind, forgetting that they, while they're no longer target audiences, they might belong in other segments. But that's a very real thing, I think, that you just said, which is that as you grow as a business owner, your values change, your sense of worth changes. And that might mean that your price point and your audience changes too.
Yeah. And having a network of other business women that you can refer people to, because as I grew in the wedding business, and I have wedding planners that were coming behind me that were starting out and they were doing the weddings at the recreation centers. Okay, I am not your planner, but let me refer you to someone that could meet your budget. Let me refer you to someone that could be your planner. So being able to have that network of women or other planners to refer to in that case, because it happened to me, it was for, it was evolving. So being able to have that right at your fingertips too is always good.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep. Thank you. And Dr. Conica just said this. I don't know if you all are following along in the chat. Consistency matters with pricing as clients also speak to each other. And that's the point I was trying to make earlier, Edith. I don't know if I expounded on that, is that even though, and this is just, well, no, it's not just my opinion, even if the people that come to us are not our ideal customer, like the way that we engage with them changes because they very well could be connected to our ideal customer. And so consistency with like how we treat people, what we offer, even if some people can't afford it, couldn't change because you just never know. You never know who's connected to who knows what. Google reviews, the advent of online reviews, period, has changed the game drastically in terms of accountability for business owners. So the prices can change, but again, kind of the deliverables might not. And
And
then one last person, I think Felice had her, excuse me, Felice, I'm sorry if I missed you, but I think you had your hand raised.
No, Lindsay and you guys said it all.
Okay.
So I just was thinking about that. Sometimes I mean, I've not been in business a whole lot, but the things I used to sell, I would listen to people and they say, "Oh, just drop your price, drop your price." And I start realizing, that's I think it's culture at some point. That if you look at different cultures, we are always trying to get a bargain, and I think that's how people are. And what I used to say when I used to sell jewelry is, and I would let them know, you don't go into Macy's and bargain with them and you say that you are my friend. So
Mm,
my product is just as valuable. It may not be in that store, but I'm selling you value.
yeah.
And so I think it's a cultural thing. and some people may not see it. And I was told to just say next. Yeah.
Next. I hear you. Thanks, Felice. And one last comment, Edith. Edith, did you have something?
I'm sorry. I keep going mute, unmute.
Okay, it's okay.
This is the last thing I have to say is that, and I'm glad you brought this up, because what God showed me, stop being desperate. Because I'll be honest with you, it was it was some times and there was no money coming in the door, right? And what we do is we start, negotiating and bargaining down, and people could smell
Desperation.
desperation,
Oh
right?
yeah. Oh
So
yeah.
so so when I got flat-footed, because I think about the prodigal son, he left with his birthright and sold his, everything. And he said, why am I living this way when the servants in my father's house are eating well, right? Bottom line is, I said, you know what? Forget it. I got flat-footed. I said, I want this an hour. I want to work remote. I ideally would like to work part-time. And this is the type of client. Bam. Didn't God give it? And I had to wait on it. And like you said, hone your skills. I got $1 less than what I was asking God for, but I'm not hurting. I'm not scared. So anyway, that's all I want to say. Don't cheapen yourself. Yes, it can be tight, but I did personal crowdfunding. I'm not ashamed. I did personal crowdfunding, and guess what? And you know what? Now I know how to fundraise
That's
because I
good.
had to do it for myself.
That's a good word. That's a good word. That's a good word. Thank you, Edith, for sharing that. I appreciate your transparency. Because sometimes these conversations is the elephant in the room, and we don't want to say it because we might sound some kind of way. But I think you brought up some good points. Okay, we might circle back because it looks like a lot of people have something to say about this if we have time. But I do want to make sure that we get to the rest of this. But I think there's a comment that Sadija wrote in chat, and I don't know if Sadija might not be able to mute herself. But she says, is that a personality preference or is that a service offering preference? I think that's a really, really good question to ask. One of the key lessons that I've had to learn in business is not personal, right? So all the traumas that I was talking about that I brought into business that kept me from wanting to not serve this type of person, you have deal with that thing because it does spill over and manifest into the business. The reality of the matter is, let's take Black women as an example. We are not a monolith. So if every Black woman in the door triggers something where you're like, oh, I can't do that, we are doing ourselves a disservice because there might be a Black woman that walks in the door that's a recent college grad and doesn't have the disposable income, but there very well could be a Black woman that comes in that's doing great in life and has investments and all sorts of stuff going on for herself. But because she just fit that initial criteria, I done messed around and said, I'm not treating her. So yeah, so we have to ask ourselves, is it really a service offering prejudice or bias, or is it rooted in something else? So Sadija, thank you for commenting that. I was scrolling and I saw that. Well, I think this is a great discussion. And McQuinn is a great place to have these conversations, which is why I mentioned there was some pressure to drop the M. That's at a certain point, and I was like, nah, we're not dropping the M because be able to talk about this in safe spaces. So thank you all for your honesty. More things about the customer piece. As you're thinking about 2025, your 2025 goals, I really want to, and I think Edith actually just really summarized this by saying, say no to desperation, is to be on the offense as opposed to playing defense. At some point in business, no matter if you're 1 year in or 30 years in, you find yourself kind of just trying to figure out how to maintain healthy cash flow. And you just do whatever is necessary. But I think with the proper strategy, there can be a little bit less of that each year. Anticipating customer key needs, these are called the 4 Ps of marketing. And as you're thinking about 2025, these are key questions to ask yourself. So we just did some activities with customer segmentation, right? So you might want to ask yourself these questions for each customer segment because they might differ. even though it's the same business that's serving all these customer segments, you might find that there's slight differences in the answers. But what does this customer segment need? And it's not just your service, right? If you are a coach who does professional development, that's the easy answer to say they need professional development. But there are things that are attached to the way you deliver your service that's also part of the need that's adding value to them. So it's the fact that your price point is appropriate for them. It's the fact that you have a culture that's more familial than like sophisticated or reserved, right? Like there are people who that resonates with them. The delivery of your coaching as someone who is fun and come in, we hug and we love everybody. That matters to people. So they need that. They need a home. Some people are like, keep your hugs. I came to you for coaching. Let's keep it professional. And that's what works for them. So asking yourself beyond the actual service provision, what do they need? The delivery of that thing. The price point, again, we don't want to belabor this point, but as you can see, it's mentioned several times because this literally can be the hit or miss for many people. Spend a lot of time building something, and if this thing is a miss, you'll end up questioning your entire purpose because nobody is buying it. McQuinn, we've had to adjust our price point several times. One of the ways that you can do this, right? How much will my customer pay is to do market research. One of two ways you can do this. You can ask the people who are already engaged with you, is this price point appropriate? And you don't ask just the people that you know or are familiar with you because they are invested in making you feel good, right? You ask the people who are strangers. This is why we don't get mad when our friends don't patronize us because they're not our customers, they are our friends. If they overlap sometimes, that's a blessing, but we don't want to pressure our friends into becoming customers, but we ask strangers, what's this price point? Is this appropriate? How much was the value for this thing? And we adjust accordingly. And we don't do this mid-year or mid-service provision, right? It's inconsiderate of how they've planned as our customers. But we do these at critical moments in our planning phase so that we can do an appropriate rollout that honors their trust in us as business owners. The place, where can they access the product? Accessibility is huge. There was a time where social media was all the rage. And then people found they were going live for 2, 3 hours a day and not being able to monetize that, but they could send out one email blast and one customer purchased the product that was the equivalent of the 3 hours that they spent on live. So knowing the behavior of your customers and what place actually works for them to access the product is really key, which is why that ICP is something that I think everybody should do. What's the best method of communication? Based on your segmentation, that is also important. I remember working with someone who did youth development and asked the question, who's your ideal customer? And they initially started to say the youth. Youth don't have any money, right? So your ideal customer is really the people that take care of the youth, right? The people that fund their lives. So their parents, their guardians, the teachers, the school districts that might have extra money for after school programming, churches that might be investing in youth ministry. And all of those people are hanging out in different places. Some are accessible by apps, some only check newsletters, some you need to do a text message campaign, some are hanging out on LinkedIn and they're not hanging out or making buying decisions on Instagram. Or if they are hanging out on Instagram, that's their social time. That's not the time that they're seriously considering purchasing decisions. So figuring out based on this target, based on the ICP, how do we work with them? And again, you might want to consider answering the 4 Ps for 2025 for each segment and not just doing kind of a broad answer and assume that all of your customer segments are going to fit into this. Okay. The next thing is finances. And so there are 2 polls. So I'll launch one of them. Can I launch one of them? A poll has been launched. Oh, okay, I have to end one to launch another one. Okay, so the question is, are you maximizing your current revenue stream? And obviously this isn't anonymous, so think about it honestly for yourself. No, not sure. Okay, no, not sure. Okay. Interesting. So of all the people that answered, we don't have a yes. So if anyone feels comfortable, this is a safe space. But for someone who says they're not sure, what's the challenge there? Why are you not sure? Okay, or someone who answered no. If I could ask if you're comfortable, why? What would you say is the challenge to not maximizing your current revenue stream?
I'll go. I
Consistency.
answered no.
Okay, who's that? I can't see.
I should turn on my camera. Sorry, I end up sitting down on the couch.
Oh.
I answered, I know that I'm not, and it goes back to when you were talking about I don't have the capacity. My biggest thing is capacity. I don't have the there's so much more that we could be bringing in, but the capacity just isn't there.
Mhm. Yep. Yep. That's a common problem. Um, a blanket suggestion to that, Khadija, for me, because I know we're in similar spaces, was to not do everything at the same time. So in order to free up some capacity, I had to prioritize what was going to bring me a good sustainable return. And once that became automated, that freed me to do things that required a little bit more attention. Um, and I can delve deeper into that if that makes sense. But I hear you with the capacity thing. I think there was someone else that was going to share. Anyone else? What's the challenge? Okay.
I'd like to
Um, uh-huh.
Sorry. So I feel a challenge is being in the right room with the people that you should be serving. And so what I found for myself is that I have something to offer, but I'm in the room with everybody that's offering the same thing. And so
Mhm.
the service that I have to provide is not needed by those people. So not surrounded, great to surround yourself with people who are similar to you because you can, like Lindsay said, have the network that you can refer others to, but then taking yourself out of that space so that you can be in the space where the people need you.
That's good. That's good. Yeah. Oh, stewardship. That's a word that we keep talking about. And our mental health, our physical health, we're called to be stewards of that too. And if we're constantly at the brim, like spilling over, it's a very hard and stressful place to be. And that's the thing that taught me that is true when people say you don't know how stressful it can be unless you've been an entrepreneur. Like you don't know what it takes. So I hear that, Nicole. Alicia, okay, delve a little bit deeper. So I'll use my consulting practice as an example. Um, I came to the realization that the nature of consulting is that most times it had to be one-on-one, right? Like I can't change that. That's just what it is. So let's say I was making $1,000 per client and I needed $10,000 a month to maintain a healthy cash flow. Since I couldn't change the nature of one-on-one consulting, what I ended up doing was saying, well, the consulting that I'm doing now, what if I developed programs around it? And I started bidding for contracts that would allow me to do this type of consulting, but for groups of people with organizations that can afford $10,000. And so rather than like a business to business approach where I'm trying to get one client at a time, I started to bid for contracts that would give me $10,000 at a time. Right. So I could still do the consulting as my time allowed, but the priority became bidding for 5 contracts with the likelihood that I might get one of those. And that became a system that was automated. So every month, top of month, we bid for 5 contracts with the hopes that we would at least get one. So that was one thing. There was another thing, right? We developed something called business in a box because over the years of doing consulting, we realized 4 out of 6 clients, 3 out of 5 clients would ask for the same exact things. So rather than saying, okay, we'll send you a proposal for this exact thing that you need every single time a client came to us, we developed something called business in a box, which is all the things that people ask for. And they can either order it as a standard box or they can pick and choose, right, as a digital box. and we subcontracted with people who could fulfill those boxes. And let's say the percentage split was 60-40. So the people that provided that that service was getting 60 and we were getting 40. But it took our hands off of having to actually do that work. The automation was that there's now an order form. You choose of the most frequently requested things, services, which one you want, you pay for it. We then send it to our subcontractor. So that's what the business in a box became. It's like, what's the reoccurring need that people have? So automating business in a box freed us up so that the things that we couldn't get around having to do on a one-on-one basis, like consulting, we could do without having to like split our time over the other things that could be automated. Hopefully that makes sense, Alicia. Okay, hopefully. Okay, final poll question for the night. How many streams of revenue does your business have? Okay, 1 to 3, 3 to 6. Okay. And there's no right or wrong responses to this. You're welcome. And if Alicia, if we need to talk more, I'm happy to kind of hang out a little bit after, or if there's time towards the end. Okay, most people here have 1 to 3. That's good. Based again on your capacity, that's the word again. 1 to 3 could be doable. My challenge to people is always is like to think outside of the box. So it's likely that there are streams that are available to you that might not be tapped into if you're still at the 1 to 3 mark. I don't know if you all remember a few years ago, Forbes published this article that said the average millionaire in America has 7 streams of income. And it's usually things that we overlook and don't think of it like as rigid as this could be a stream of income for me. But I think that businesses easily can recycle current offerings to add additional streams, but it involves some creativity and again, thinking outside of the box. So if you're a coach, for example, you might have your one-on-one coaching, that's one stream. You might have group coaching, that's another stream. You might have recorded content that serves as a webinar. If there's a library on your website that people can just purchase a la carte somewhere that you're not even targeting, that's a third stream of income. If you have merch that repurposes some of your content, that's a fourth stream. If you have books that you've developed, that's a fifth stream. If you take your coaching content and you develop a curriculum that other people are able to teach, the kind of train the trainer series, that's the sixth stream of income. If you are contracted out to just speak as a professional speaker, not necessarily with the consulting hat on, that's a seventh stream of income. And this goes on indefinitely, right? So really thinking about repurposing is huge when it comes to maximizing the streams of revenue. I've had to do that exercise as many times with nonprofits because they want to put all the money in the grant bucket. But I'm like, no, there's so many other ways to really exhaust the options that are available to you. But the big thing for many of us is finances. So this wall is focusing on how does your organization earn money? Diversification is key here. How do I diversify without exhausting myself? Repurposing is the goal. How do I repurpose what's already working? When you do your SWOT analysis at some point, you really want to focus on that strengths quadrant because that's going to tell you we do these things well. Like the business in a box was kind of an accidental discovery for us, right? Like we didn't sit down and say we're going to plan out business in a box as a product, but there was an aha moment where we're looking at the data, right? The data, so to speak, of like literally everybody that's referred to us asked for this same thing. But it takes some time to intentionally sit and kind of process. The other thing, if you remember the formula I mentioned earlier, revenue minus expenses equals profitability. How does your business spend money? If cash flow is a huge issue for you, the temptation is to just focus on revenue, but sometimes that's not the issue. Sometimes it's expenses. I remember when COVID hit and we were all out of the office and we were looking at our operational budget. And I was like, a huge part of this operational budget is our overhead that's associated with the office space that we were using and all the costs that are associated with that. So if you're paying utilities separately from your office rent, if you have a printer in office, if you got to get a desk, if you have to furnish all of these things, a telephone line, et cetera, et cetera. But sometimes the goal for the year might be how do we eliminate over time without diminishing value, of course, but how do we eliminate some of these expenses? And obviously, as business owners, this is not the wall that's the end all be all, right? 1 Timothy 6:10. So we're not like developing businesses for money, but we see over and over in scripture that the ability to build wealth and the ability to manage wealth is definitely an indication of a blessing from God. And so we want to pay attention to how we're doing that so that we're not stressed. So diversification and automation. If you don't have an operational budget for your business, now is the time to get an operational budget. And this is the paperwork that a lot of us don't like because we just want to do business. Like we just want to do what God has called us to do, but that stewardship piece again, these are some of the things that are not fun. So if you've never developed an operational budget, this is what it looks like, right? So when we're talking about diversifying, you see this budget kind of suggest some of that. So you have your revenue that's coming from consulting fees, but there are different types of consulting. So for you, again, it might be that one-on-one consulting, it might be that group coaching, it might be the video offering that you have for people who are remote and who are far away from you. It might be the merch, but each of those things, as you're thinking about diversification, has its own line item. And there should be a stark difference in what the return is on some of these. So even with this example, we see that one based on industry, right, is bringing in $1,300 for the first quarter, and another is bringing less than $1,000. My guess is that the way that they market to these people is going to be very, very different. And the likelihood is that they're focusing on the people that are making them more money. Not forgetting the other people, but prioritizing the thing that's going to, again, bring them that greater return. And then you never want to underestimate your expenses. For a lot of us, Sadija mentioned capacity. I'm telling you, salary will kill you. Like salary is the thing, right? So a lot of us don't hire. But what happens if we rethink efficiency, right? So what happens if there is one person that can do the job of 3 people, right? Or what happens if we make using Chat GPT an intentional part? So we invest in software, for example, that might cost $20 a month, but it's doing half of what an admin assistant would do that used to cost us $500. So part of it is like research intensive, right? So as I'm looking at how do I offset some of these costs, what can replace the things that are costing me a lot of money? With this operational budget, you're seeing the salary consultant by itself is almost negating the computer system consulting. So they're neck and neck. So you're really not making much money from one of these consulting items because your salaries are eating them up. If you're traveling, you have that to consider, your general administration, depreciation, taxes, which I'm telling you, taxes will get you every single time. And what's your plan around that? Your corporate allocation, and then any other expenses that you have. And going back to one of the earlier screens where we had the linear approach versus the circular approach, this is what it looks like, right? To have a set time for assessment. So if we said we're going to make $1 million and then the first quarter we make $2,310, but then we find that second quarter, and they've made these all even, but we made 180K, then that means that the next quarter we need to make what, $40,000 more, $30,000 more. So that means that you either need to adjust your price point, you need to add an additional stream of revenue or income for your business, but something has to change if your operating budget is suggesting a fluctuation in that way. If you've never done an operational budget, it's never too late to at least start that. A good place to start is to get a software like a QuickBooks or Wave apps, which is free if you don't want to invest in accounting software from the start. And it has the import, export capabilities that you'll need that'll help you integrate it into a QuickBooks later on. But doing this is really, again, critical to figure out where not only you're making money, but where your leaks are. I had a time, 2024, end of 23, going into 2024, where I literally had to look and see where all the leaks were happening. And y'all, I was shocked to see that one of the major leaks for me in business was subscriptions. And you don't think about this because these things are automatically coming out of your account, and you're like, oh, that's just $9.99, except that they jacked the price up to $14.99 and you didn't consider it. And then everybody else jacked their price up by 40% markup. And these subscriptions were literally a leak. And then all of a sudden, Andrina being the genius that she is, wait a minute, McQuinn is a nonprofit. Why don't we see? Because sometimes it's hidden, it's not there in plain sight. Are any of these platforms offering a nonprofit discount? The way to save money, right? So, but without looking at your operational budget, sometimes it's easy to miss some of these things. So as an action item, one of the things that I would encourage you all to do is to really consider, what does your overall operational budget look like? What are my streams of revenue for 2025? Am I exhausting those, and how do I develop new ones? Any questions about this? Have about 15 minutes. Okay. And then the fourth wall is capacity. So developing culture, increasing your bandwidth, leadership development, personal and professional development, and then again, automation. Before we do that though, I'm gonna stop share really quick. So if you go into your shared drive again, Nicole's goal plan. Okay, Nicole, you saved your thing on the, okay. You know what, never mind, I'm not gonna do that. Nicole, but you saved your goal plan in the shared drive. I don't know if you meant to do that.
Nope, didn't.
I figured. Okay, so capacity. What's within that's going to help you run this organization in 2025, or this business in 2025? You ask yourself who, what, where, when, and how, right? What are our core values? And building people who are going to serve that core value even when you are not there in your presence. And what does our brand represent so that you recruit people? One of two ways that a lot of us seem to struggle in the areas of capacity is either not having enough to get people on board, or bringing people on board but not being able to retain them. So you have to figure out where that leak is for you. There are services. How many people here, by a show of hands or by a drop of a comment in the chat, are nonprofit? Anybody? Okay, so one of the things, nonprofit one, I know there are at least 3 people in here who are nonprofits. Thinking outside of the box sometimes looks like maximizing the resources that are available to you that are beyond the traditional like employee hiring thing. So this is how we deal with hiring people. Places like a volunteer match, places like a handshake.com will help you build capacity, but in terms of recruiting people, but what they won't do is help you retain the people that you have. And so one of the ways that you work on retaining people is to build systems that make it a healthy and a good place for people to work. If that means that you have to start over, that's okay. Okay? How do we do that? We look at the process of people working with us from start to finish. So from the recruitment piece, sometimes we overlook what recruitment looks like because we're like, oh, I'm just a solopreneur. Oh, I'm just a small business. But we're small businesses that have to think like big businesses. So questions to think about for 2025, is there an employee handbook? Are there universal or uniformed ways for people to engage with us internally and externally? And if the answer is no, then recruitment and retention are going to be difficult for you when you're thinking long terms for sustainability and retention. So when I'm not there, what does somebody else follow? We recruit them based on a set criteria. We train them based on a set criteria. We offboard them based on a set criteria. Who, what, where, when, and how. Are our core values reflected in the people that we bring in? And if that's traditionally not been the case, it's not too late to reevaluate, figure out how do we change that. If you're a nonprofit, like I said, the places like the Volunteer Match, the Handshake, the Indeed.com will help you recruit the people that it doesn't financially cost you anything to help you build your business, but they will cost you your time. Now, if you are a for-profit, again, there are creative ways. You just have to make sure that you're legally compliant. But I remember building Perk Consulting, and interns were responsible for a lot of the work that we did. And these are students who were super eager to do the work. They were trained academically to do the work. We had the option to choose whether we wanted to go with undergrads or master's level students. But the idea here was that they would not walk into chaos, but they would walk into something that was mutually beneficial. So they were getting the learning experience. So stewardship looked like building a culture that made it good for them to work. But then we were also benefiting from the fact that they built our capacity to actually do the work for our clients. Okay, so the who, what, where, when, and how. Building capacity sometimes is not about the finances, it's about building a system that will incentivize folks to work with you, even if they're not benefiting financially. Has anybody here used interns? No? Okay. Is
Can you
there
repeat that question again? I didn't, it blanked out.
has anybody used interns?
Oh yeah. I use it for my wedding planning. I use high school students in Baltimore City because they have to have their hours. So
Mhm.
for setup and breakdown, I will go to the school and the trade schools
Mhm.
and connect with them and use them.
Yep, and that's another thing, right? The job. I remember we had a partnership with a Job Corps one year. Um, And based on the platforms that you use to build capacity, you're going to get different caliber of people, right? So if you're working with high school students, the likelihood is you're going to do a little bit more hand holding. But this is where you begin to think of how to duplicate yourself or replicate yourself, right? So if there's one of me, then perhaps the dedication for the next 30 days is to train somebody who's able to act as a proxy for me. They think like me, they use the same language as me, their decision making is very similar to me. I remember a student, and some of you all who went to conferences know this, her, Darielle, who was a young lady that was so eager to work, and literally the youngest person that I ever worked with. And I mean, just it was a mentoring opportunity, but it turned out to pay dividends for me because her ability to do decision making, it was a lot of pouring out for me, meant that she could then train other people in my absence. And so for those who are, I'm saying all of that to say, for those who are having a hard time building capacity, sometimes that looks like creatively rethinking what that system or that pipeline looks like. From recruitment, we only recruit people who have our best interest at heart. We only recruit people who meet these objective set standards of criteria. We train those people. We don't take for granted that because they met those standards when they come in, that means they're automatically going to be compliant and they're automatically going to plug right into the culture, but we train them a set way. So there's the initial training or orientation, and perhaps there's a quarterly training that happens, or every 6 months we train them. And then again, we offboard, because when people leave, they're the best people to ask, like, what was good? How can we incentivize others to be a part of what we're doing? So building capacity, again, recruitment, retention, two different issues. And for 2025, you want to identify based on 2024, what was the biggest challenge for me? Other things that are okay to try, I think, creatively are platforms that will allow you to outsource things to people that you might not have originally thought of, right? So the Upworks, the Fivers, McQuinn offers a VA service, but things like that. We all want the big team, right? Because it's an indication of the fact that we're scaling and we're doing well as business owners. But again, if you can get one person that efficiently works and can do the work of three people, it might be something that you want to consider. And that might mean a sacrifice. So if I lower my expenses and subscription, I can reallocate that money toward building capacity and just getting someone to just manage my administrative things. So something to consider. As you're thinking through all of these things as we begin to wrap up for the evening, a key thread for all four walls is to consider what your KPIs will be for 2025. And KPIs are key performance indexes. These are the things that when you check throughout your year will be an indication of whether you're on track for the goals that you're setting now or whether you are way behind. Okay, so the definition that we're using, actions and tools of measurement used to monitor the progress toward achieving objectives in the following areas. And those are the 4 walls that we talked about. And you want to establish your KPIs for each of these. And so I actually would love for everybody to think through a KPI for each wall for your business. But to kind of walk you through an example, this is what it looks like using finances as an example, the financial wall. There are 4 steps for identifying your KPI. Step 1 is to establish your goal and objective. So that first sheet that we did, that first activity that we did tonight, you identified a specific benchmark for yourself. That's the goal and objective. Next year, we want to make $100,000. Step 2 is to identify what's known as your critical success factors. These are the things that are, these are all numeric, right? But these are the things that will determine whether or not you're on track to reach that goal or objective. So in this case, as a consultant, it's going to be the number of clients times my hourly rate. It's as simple as that. We're not considering the nuance of marketing and the service provision and all the other things we talked about. But if my goal is next year, $10,000, only 2 things known as my critical success factors will determine this. The number of clients that I serve times my hourly rate. And so what you want to do is in an ideal state, right, assuming that this will stay the same throughout all of 2025, this is what these numbers will look like. So if you're currently serving at $100 an hour, that's an easy math equation. I need to get 100 clients. Now, how you get those, you're going to develop additional CFFs, right? So 100 clients for the entire year, and please track with me. I know it's kind of a lot, but 100 clients a year, assuming that we're successfully serving people 10 months out of the 12-month year. We say a month, we're going to just assume we're not going to get much return because we're going to lose it to the holidays. And then perhaps a month of downtime where we're strategically planning and reevaluating. So 10 months of service provision, 100 clients is the goal. That means that we have to serve 10 clients every single month at our set price point to reach our goal for 2025. Now we can start to consider the other things like marketing, right? And for each of those, marketing is going to fall in your operations quadrant. You're going to do the KPI activity all over again. And I know it's going to sound overwhelming, but once you begin to do this, the KPI conversation when it comes to your marketing might look like, for every event that we do, we get 3 clients. So in order to get 10 clients from events, that means I need to do 3 events a month. You begin to establish your critical success factors. Or perhaps it's not events. For every Facebook Live that I do, I always convert 1 client. That means I need to do 10 Facebook Lives in order to meet that benchmark of 10 clients to meet that quota for the month. And this is how we begin to establish our critical success factors to work our way toward the goal. Okay, and you can do the same thing for all of these other walls, right? So there's one of me, I have to service 10 clients, but if for whatever reason, my bandwidth decreases and I can't service 10 clients, that means I need to bring in 1 additional person who can service 5 clients. But that 1 additional person is coming to me at a cost. So if I need to pay them $5,000, that's an additional $5,000 now, which means that rather than 10 clients, we have to service 15 clients. So I now have to adjust my critical success factors, which means I either increase my price point, right? Or I lower what my end goal is going to be. So step 1 again is establish the goal and objective, and you can do this for all 4 of these walls. Establish your critical success factors, and it's going to look like you're like kind of diminishing or downplaying it, and it boils down to just numbers, but that's really what it boils down to. And then you're going to establish your KPI from your CSF, your critical success factors. So there's an example there in parentheses. And then you're going to track your implementation and metrics. Hence that circular approach that I mentioned. So if I need to onboard somebody because 10 clients is becoming too much for me, well, guess what? at my half-year review that I do in June, I'll adjust a price point. I'll do a 30-day rollout where we inform our audience, right? Good stewardship, that hey, the prices are going to go up by 20%. So account for the fact that our team is growing. And within 30 days, those clients that stick with us, we reward them with something. And then they're grandfathered into the rate that they might be locked into. And then for our new clients, they're coming in at this specific rate. But again, there's a strategy that goes behind that. And you don't have to explain that to your entire audience, that part of it, but on the back end, you know that this is being informed by your KSFs and your KPIs and your CSF. At the end of this, if you walked your way through those four walls, that's essentially the bulk of the strategic plan that you have for 2025. So those four walls, you see them here, your financial wall, right? The goal that you set on that goal sheet that we did at the very beginning, that is your priority for the year. So it doesn't have to be this big thing, right? And then the thing that you put in that second section, where will I be in 6 months? That becomes the goal that you're putting here. And then your 90 days is what you begin to put in your action plan. That's the bulk of it. If you've done the SWOT analysis, that's telling you things like what you see on the outside of the plan, on the left and right margin of this plan. So my core values, right? Those things are important because I've looked at my customer segmentation, I've looked at my operations and developed my mission, vision, and purpose. My competitive advantage, that's informed by the strengths quadrant of my SWOT. So this is what sets me apart from everybody else. And it's not superficial stuff, but these are things that people have said, our customers have confirmed. How will we play? That is the strategy. And this is just narrative form of next year, we're going to do this based on this information that we've received, et cetera, et cetera. And the key performance indicators are the things that we just talked about as you're thinking through the actual metrics for each of those things. Now, the key here, even though you want to come up with KPIs for all four walls, my recommendation is to keep on your strategic plan, keep it assigned to your financial wall, because that actually will affect everything else. But for purposes of the strategic plan, you want to keep it there. Your vision, that's probably not going to change, but it is going to inform your operations. It's going to inform your capacity. It's going to inform how you market. So it doesn't hurt to reiterate that here. And then your implementation. So for 2025, and I'll use this as a dental clinic sample. The first way that we're going to support our implementation is just have someone assigned. If you're a solopreneur, that's you, right? And so you might actually put it in your calendar every third month of the quarter. We're going to actually have a review where I sit down and do an assessment because I'm so busy actually doing service provision. I don't get to look at the operational budget or to look at our capacity building plan. But part of implementation is I'm actually going to set aside time and do that. Post reminders, and these things seem like obvious things, but they're not things that we always do as small business owners. If you're building a team, something as simple as aligning performance management and compensation or bonus structure with a strategic plan is helpful. I remember at one point building a team with a few people, and part of the reward for people actually meeting the goal was like, take a day off, and it's a paid day off, right? And it's like, it's not necessarily like, let me just give you some money, but it's like, if I have to keep morale up so that bigger goals can be met, then that's part of what we do. And then host an annual planning retreat. Now, if you are a small business owner that has a team, at some point you do want to involve everybody as part of this, but it's more important that you actually sit down yourself and have a planning retreat or a time to just think through and seek the Lord in prayer and document the things and the direction that he's taking you in before you do a retreat with everybody else. Kind of like what we're starting here, but you want to be able to do that. So there's a template of this in that shared drive that we have for you all, where you can begin to think through in the next 10 days for your 2025 goals, all of these pieces. And in an ideal world, you want to be so detailed in this that you can consult it month by month and just follow this as a blueprint. Obviously, things happen. And you may have to revisit some of these things, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again, it's better for you to make a decision based on reality than like some ideal thing in your mind. But if you do this well and you focus on it enough time, it might help with creating that blueprint. Okay. I think we did, 5 minutes. Okay. I'll take one question if anybody has any questions.
Hi, this is Kim Granger.
Hi, Kim.
One of the things that you mentioned, you're talking about capacity, right? And I think for me, my issue is I've got a team. I've got actually a staff of we're now about 37 people. My concern is that it's the quality isn't the way I want it to be, if that makes sense. Um, so I know I'm a control freak in a way. Because I have the handbook, I've got the operation stuff, but it's not how I want it. So I know that I need to, which I've worked on, I've delegated and said, okay, you know what, for the leadership team, this is your job, go do this so I can focus on bigger things. But I find myself coming back to do the little things because it's not how I want. I don't know if that makes
Yeah,
any sense.
it makes perfect sense. It makes
So
perfect
how
sense.
do you fix that? If that's a good question to ask there. Like how
It
does one
is.
fix it?
So I'll tell you based on my experience and what my recommendation has been to others. For me, part of it was acknowledging that control part, like the control freak part of me, um, and separating that from my expectations for people. And just realizing that no matter what, because I am such a perfectionist about certain things, it's never going to be met, no matter what training, and really kind of resolving um, with that, like having a resolve about that and dealing with that personally, right? So that's like separate from the evaluation piece. The other part of it though was making sure that my expectations were realistic for the caliber of people that I was recruiting. So if I was recruiting people that I expected based on their resumes and past performance to work at a high level, then my job was to train them. And if they still did not meet that, then it just was not a good cultural fit, right? If these were high performing people and they seem to be high performing people in other areas, based on maybe the references and stuff, then at times it was an indication that my culture was not a good fit. Like I needed to do more training with them. I needed to implement things like performance evaluations that weren't about providing criticism for their work, but about figuring out how do we incentivize them to do more good work and how do we train them to improve the work that was lacking. So there were kind of three things, right? Like separating what's me and not holding them to a standard of perfection that they were never going to meet, figuring out who was not a culturally good fit based on their performance and being okay with letting those people go. And then the third thing was who was a culturally good fit, but was not performing because there was something lacking in my systems and figuring out how to fix those things in the systems. So there's like three levels of evaluations that were happening. Um, and they were not privy to the fact that these were all happening, but I was doing an assessment of them, everyone in those ways. And that looked like my team looked drastically different after after going through that. And I had to be okay with that as well. Almost like a restart. I had to restart the team because the expectations were not being met.
Yeah, I think
I don't
that's
know.
where I am right now. Yeah, and I mean it's rough to have to do this too around the holidays. So it's
Mhm.
just me praying and trying to figure things out. But I'm just looking at if I really need to be able to grow and get what we need to get to next year, some things have to change. And
Yeah,
so, yeah.
yeah. And a hard conversation came for me that I had to have was that my expectations did not meet the people that I was recruiting. And so if I was expecting a certain level of performance and compensation needed to be attractive to the people who would come in ready to do that kind of work. And for me, I'm not saying it's like this for you, but there were much deeper questions that I needed to kind of address, or issues that I needed to address. It wasn't as simple as they're just not performing. There were underlying issues that were um yeah, that were a part of like our internal culture.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Thank
Yes.
you. Appreciate
You're
that.
welcome. Anyone else? One final question, thought, comments? Okay, we are exactly at 9 p.m. So I hope that this was helpful for folks. I thank you all so much for hanging with us all year. The local meetups, our virtual stuff, our retreats. I hope the 2025, I hope that this was helpful. We will send out the recording to folks. And as I mentioned to Alicia earlier, I'm okay with sticking around for a few minutes. I know some people might have to go, but I'm okay with sticking around for a few minutes to answer more questions. But from the bottom of my heart and from our team, I just want to say thank you so much for just believing in the McQuinn vision, and seeing what we're trying to do here with both creating community and supporting and equipping each other so that this is not a trendy thing to do, but it's actually something that's sustainable and profitable for us. But thank you so much for just supporting McQuinn. And I see the chat and I appreciate the feedback. Thank you so much. And I'll turn it back over to Nicole to close us out.
That was amazing. Like in my head, this is a quarterly series where she delves into everything. I didn't talk to her about this. I'm just saying. Who's saying? If you saying, give the thumbs up, give the clappy clappies, give the hearts. I think this was phenomenal. So, she went through so many things, and so many things we have to pay attention and should be looking forward to paying attention in our business so that we can grow and be the good stewards of what she's gotten, what God has given us. I love the conversation that has taken place here. I love the questions. I love the support. And I want to encourage you all, if you have not done so. I know we broke out into our groups, and I went back and checked because I want to follow you all. I want to connect with you all, and I'm sure other people in here want to meet you and talk to you and find out things, because I know there's brilliance in this room, and God put us in community so that we can share our brilliance, so we can learn from each other. So if you did not put contact information in the chat, if you did not put your social media handles in the chat, I encourage you, I implore you to put them in there. As I told you, networking, being able to connect with like-minded women, being able to see how we can support and help each other is one of the things that I mainly enjoy about this community. If you're not a part of the community, I'm sure Gina will give more information on ways that you can find it, that you can become a part of this. But let's follow each other. Let's learn from each other. Let's build that connection. And Adrena, we're so grateful for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I appreciate you. And this song is going to start playing, but I appreciate you all so much. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions that people have. And I will just go ahead and just close us. Felice, I see your hand. I'm just going to close. I'm going to just close us out in prayer really quick. Um, Father, I thank you so much. I thank you for the amazing women in this community, God. And just what you've been doing with us. So many of us, we just started with an idea and you've taken it far beyond what we could have ever imagined. And to think, God, that by faith we're just getting started and there's so much more that by your grace we're going to do, God. Father, you already know what 2025 looks like. You have gone ahead of us. We believe that by faith, God. Pray that you would help us to follow behind you, God, to follow your footsteps, to follow your direction, to follow your voice, that come what may, God, that our testimony will be next year that you were with us, God. Father, for those of us who are stuck and we're figuring out our next steps, Father, we pray that you would give us clarity and that you'd give us wisdom. For those of us who know what you've called us to do, we pray for the confidence and the resources to just do it boldly, God. Pray that you continue to strengthen us. For those who are representing teams, we pray that you strengthen our teams to carry out this vision, God. And we just surrender the rest of 2024 in your hands. We pray for safety in our going and in our coming. Pray for favor in the marketplace, God. We pray for support to rise up, Father, from all corners of the earth, Father, east, west, north, and south, oh God. That favor our gifts would make way for us, Father, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, ladies. Have a good night. Oh, and don't forget, 40% off, which is different from our end of the year sale, which is 30% off, but 40% off if you use code final event 24 this weekend to become a member of McQuinn. And our meetups start January 17th in your city. We are in 17 cities now, which is so crazy. But meetups start again in January in person. So we hope to see you in a city. Thank you all so much. And I know folks have a question, so I'll start with Felice. If anybody has to drop off, have a great Christmas holiday, and we'll see you soon.
I just want to know, can you put the social media handles of McWin in the room in case somebody wants to follow on IG or Facebook?
Yes, absolutely. So we are MCWE_network on every platform. No, most platforms. Facebook, you have to spell out our full name, Minority Christian Women Entrepreneurs Network, but MCWE_network.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I love you, ladies, but I have to go. I've been up since 4:30.
No problem, Felice. Have a great Christmas.
Have a great Christmas. Love you all. See y'all in 2025.
Amen. Amen.
Just one question. This is my first event. I've never been here before.
Sure.
And it was amazing. And I wanted to know, is there a time limit on this final event 24?
In terms of what?
In terms of joining.
Oh, yes. So this code will expire Sunday night. But you can,
Okay.
we have a end of the year sale with a different code that you can use. It's going to be on our website at midnight tonight, and that doesn't expire until December 31st.
Okay.
Yeah. And that one it's a little
All
bit
righty.
lower off. Mhm.
Okay. Thank you. Good night, ladies.
You're welcome. Have a good night.
Okay.
I have a question, Andrina. And I guess it's more of it is a question, more of perspective, encouragement, and just kind of insights from you and anyone else's journey in terms of like when you first, so I found that I'm really good at I'm off mute. Sorry, my kids background talk. Kennedy.
Yeah, no problem.
And so my question, and just in terms, like I found that one of my strengths, I'm really good at like foundations and building and setting.